Got it.
Thank you, Chairman, Ranking Member. Thank all of you. I find your testimony um, very, very informative. I'm going to get right to it. I have a few questions. In parts of my district, upstate New York, Hudson Valley, Catskills, very, very rural area, I have driven by signs that say broadband access coming soon. It's the sight that is hard to imagine in New York, in the USA, in the 21st century. I can overstate how big an issue this is for small business and communities in my district in upstate New York. Mr. Romano, your testimony very powerfully speaks to that. In today's global economy, it's unthinkable that startup businesses, mom and pop shops, young students, small dairy farmers, and innovative sustainable ag operations are being left behind because of where they live and operate. Now, my state, has made significant investments of late to bridge this gap. But as we look to a more connected future, I think it's critical that we also work to ensure equitable broadband access. And again, as you note in your testimony, the minimum service thresholds today will be unworkable for folks tomorrow. We should be aspirational as we think about the quality and speed of service folks need to keep up with our rapidly changing economy. So, with that in mind, Mr. Romano, what is an acceptable speed of service, not by definition, but in practice? And how can we ensure rural communities like mine don't get left behind again?
Thank you, Congressman. We have a number of members in your district, and I know that they're doing a very good job on broadband, but they also look around and see the challenges you're talking about. New York has taken important steps to try to address that. It's somewhat frustrating sometimes when you focus on a static speed definition. You're building networks financed for, and then intended to last for decades, 20 years. We really believe that you should be looking more at the future-proof utilization of the network, the applications that are going to be utilized, not aiming for a speed standard by date X, but thinking about, will that network be scalable to fulfill demands that we might expect reasonably 10, 15, 20 years from now? Telemedicine applications, 4K TV definition, 8K, beyond. So we really like to focus more on the future-proof nature of the technology underlying the network than at speed at any given moment in time specifically.
And I appreciate your desire not to want to put a number out, but is there a range?
I would say we should be aiming for networks that are capable of delivering at least 100 megs today and scalable to hit gigabit and beyond tomorrow.
Good. Another issue, again, this is for you, Mr. Romano, is broadband mapping. Current mapping practices rely on census blocks, meaning that if just one home in that block has broadband, the entire area is considered served. In rural areas, one census block can span several counties. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of establishing an accurate national broadband map?
One of the most significant problems in identifying where broadband is needed is false positives. Overstatement of coverage that leads to, in census blocks that might be miles wide, one customer in one part of one location denying service essentially to a customer miles and miles away. Movement towards a more granular, accurate map is going to be important. I would submit that granularity and accuracy are not the same thing. We need to both get more granular and get more accurate. Unless you're going to independently verify the submissions by providers in question, I believe you're always going to need, sort of like what RUS is looking at now, a challenge process or some way having a verification of, no matter what kind of data is submitted by a provider, ultimately having the opportunity to say, yeah, they are there, or no, they aren't. That's the only way we're going to get to make sure that no customer is left behind simply because they happen to live in a geography where somebody else claimed to serve.
Thank you. And I have just one more question for you, Ms. Bilinick. Really appreciate your remarks. And I wanted to speak to some of the limitations you outlined for CDFIs and, putting aside, the impact of Dodd-Frank. You do list a couple of other items that you think pose stress or strain on your ability to do the work that you're doing. Specifically, and I just want to note, too, that in my district, the work that your kind of program provides has had a tremendous effect and has provided a lot of opportunities, particularly for folks actually just north in the Albany area. So really appreciate that work. But specifically, you talk about non-existent marketing budgets, challenges to capitalizing on your loan funds and or sustaining the high overhead costs associated with labor-intensive loans we underwrite. Could you specifically tell me what we can do to help address these factors?
So I think to start, the marketing issue is an issue that all CDFIs faced. I think anyone who's worked in the industry and gone to a dinner party knows that once you tell someone that you work for a CDFI, it's then like a 20-minute later conversation describing what CDFIs do, the coverage in the whole United States, and the impact that we have. So one thing, specifically, I think, and I was actually speaking with OFN about this as well, is just a broader marketing campaign about the existence of CDFIs. I think there's, so many clients that come through our offices that say, we had no idea this existed. If I had only known 10 years ago, fill in the blank. But it's just sort of the best kept secret out there. And we really feel like that, and maybe that's more at the local level and doing, PSAs, and that, something we could certainly engage our local governments in as well. And then with regard to capitalizing our loan funds, I would just, I wouldn't say beg, but I would request that you please keep the line items for CDFI fund in Treasury and Small Business Administration fully funded, because that's something that really impacts our bottom line, and is actually the lowest cost capital that we can access in terms of debt to then re-lend out. And then my last issue around the labor intensivity of the work that we do, we're really dependent on the philanthropic community, whether that be, government grants or corporate foundation grants that we rely on, just because the work that we do lending with small businesses is so intensive. If you walk into a bank, you may meet with a loan officer, and then they ship your application to a central office located elsewhere, and that's sort of the end of the story. And you may have a really quick turnaround, but there's not that face-to-face and personal experience. For us, we're typically working with people who have a very big story behind what they're presenting on paper, and then in addition to that, what they're presenting on paper requires a lot of support from us to actually get from their idea phase to, like, we help people put together their projections for their loan applications to us. So we're, doing a lot of technical assistance just in the underwriting process. So it's not, we do have an algorithm that we use internally, but it's not like a spit it into the machine and get a response, which is the beauty of CDFIs. And that's how we're able to do the loans that we're able to do. But it costs a lot of money, and it costs a lot of manpower, even at our most efficient. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I want to now recognize the gentlelady from American Samoa.